obviously everybody who is a producer wants to get better. Everyone that does anything wants to learn how to get better. And in this video, I wanted to cover the 3 different steps and the 3 different parts of the process that you can do as a music producer, and that you can learn in that same order in order to become better, quicker, and just really excel at the whole process and have a solid foundation as a producer. Because a lot of us, we're decent, and then we always get this writer's block because we don't have that foundation that is solid. We always have to be trying to experiment until we get something. And there is a way to counter that, and that is to just know the boundaries of what you're doing and to understand and to have mastered each step of this process. Basically, I've separated production into 3 different skills that I think should be mastered in a chronological order, kind of in order, to be able to become a better producer. So the first one is composition, theory, and arrangement. So music theory and all that. The second skill that you need to learn after that is sound design and sample selection. If you're more of those kind of sample based guys like in hip hop. And then the third skill is the mixing and mastering process. And it's kind of the same way when you're producing one song. You start with the theory, then you move on to the design. You fix up some of the instruments or replace certain sounds until you get it right, and then you mix and master. So it kind of makes sense in that kind of a situation, and I think it also makes sense if you're trying to learn how to produce as a whole. So I'm going to cover each one, and it's going to make sense to you in a second. So the first thing that you need to master as a music producer, in order to be able to knock these different skills out and become a good producer way faster, is you need to learn music theory. So a lot of people, a lot of producers, they have just these great ideas, but they don't have good theory. So occasionally there'll be like an off note in their songs, or just little things like that that just ruin the whole thing. And I feel like music theory is the foundation of every song. It always starts with the chords and the notes and the idea first. So you need to know how to compose first. And music theory isn't that complicated. It's just kind of the boundaries that are set in music. So just different scales. When you learn a scale, you learn to stick to that scale, to those 7 notes, and your song is going to sound in harmony. As soon as you start stepping out of the boundaries, it ruins the whole, you're stepping out of bounds. It doesn't make sense anymore. So I feel like music theory is the most important part. You need to know the boundaries of your craft before you can start pushing them. So I feel like people are constantly trying to push the boundaries without having a firm understanding of what they are. So that's what music theory teaches you, and you'll be surprised it's not that hard to learn. And it's kind of the language of music. You need to understand the language first, like the rhythm, how to transition between different parts. You need to know after 16 bars, usually I can transition into a drop, and after that I can add a bridge. Just simple things like that. So that's kind of the first step in the whole process of becoming a better producer. Just master that. Write whole songs. The best way to get better is to practice, to actually do something. You can't become a great basketball player, for example, or a great athlete, or even just a musician without touching an instrument or without practicing your sport. So same thing with music. You need to put it into work. So write a lot of melodies using your theory that you're learning. Just get it ingrained into your mind so that you can move on to the next step. All right, so the next skill to master is the design, sound design, sample selection, all those little things. Once you know the theory, you can go ahead and arrange samples in a creative way that's going to blow your audience's mind or impress your audience, or just allow them to chill out and vibe to your stuff. But you need to know the music theory first, and then the design comes next. And basically, the design is kind of like the vocabulary for music. There's the language, and then there's many different ways to say the same thing. And in terms of music, The design would be like the vocabulary, because that's where you can switch out different instruments, kind of like a writer would switch out different words or use different synonyms in their novel. Like, it's the part where you can really emphasize an idea. And when you hear a writer using all this vocabulary, but his grammar doesn't make sense and he doesn't understand the language before using the vocabulary, and he's using all these complicated, extravagant words, it makes him sound dumb. So same thing, you need to understand the theory, and then you can emphasize your ideas using sounds. You can switch out instruments and just play with the vocabulary, and that really is like the next step. It's kind of like writing a novel, like I said. But again, learn the language first, then the vocabulary, and then the next process is going to be the mixing and mastering process. So it's getting kind of dark, so my room is getting a little bit darker. But the third and final step, the last thing you need to really master after you've mastered the two previous steps, is the mixing and mastering process. And that's kind of the polishing process of your song. And it's very similar to design, so you could throw it in there. But basically, just like how when you write a novel, you have all these long sentences, you have this really thick book, you need to cut it down, you need to edit it, you need to make space for different parts so that they're equally spaced, the same way that you would do it in a song, where you make space for each individual instrument. You mix it down really nicely. You need to make it in a way that your audience is going to accept it and hear everything, hear your whole idea nicely. That's the whole mixing and mastering process. So I guess you could kind of throw it in with design, and if you wanted to, it's kind of like the vocabulary, I guess, but it's its own process as well, because a lot of people think that mastering is just making the sounds louder, making everything louder, but I hear these songs where everything is super loud, but you can't enjoy it. Like, everything is to the front, it's too loud, like all the synths and stuff. This whole process of music production is a creative process, so you have to make certain choices. There's not one formula to do it. So that's why you need to understand each of these individually and work and move forwards through each one. Start with the first part, which is the theory, the ideas, the arrangement. Just compose full melodies and arrange them, and then move on to the more complex design. Just add filters and different ways to emphasize different melodic ideas, and then finish up by polishing up everything, putting it in different spots, making space for each idea, pulling up ideas to the front that are the most important, that bring out the most emotion that you wanted to convey through the song. So that's kind of like the whole 3 skills that I would recommend. So definitely focus on each one individually. If you don't have a full understanding of theory, go back to that. And how I did it personally is, as a beginner, I was fortunate because I just started and I went right into looking into theory. So I took the first step. It wasn't that simple at first. Like, it's kind of overwhelming to look at all these different aspects that you need to learn, but I chose to learn a little bit of theory first, like a basic scale and how scales work basically. And I would literally, at first, I would copy an idea from like a whole video, and then I would arrange that into my own idea and add my own notes using just that idea that you had to stay inside one scale. So, and then I moved on to learning design, and I kind of mixed it up with mixing and mastering, because again, there's kind of like a blurry kind of boundary between design and mixing. So, but basically, just if you want to get better faster, focus on each one of those different parts individually. Just master each one, and I guarantee that you're going to get better quicker. And those are the skills you need to impress an audience, to capture an audience's attention. A good writer needs to know the storytelling, the language first, the vocabulary, to keep their audience's attention. So anyways, if you learned something, like this video, or have any suggestions. And actually, I like when you guys add on and have your own topics, your own opinions on this. Go ahead and comment that down below. And again, this is just like an idea that I had kind of to put out as a video, how I see music production. So it's not the one correct way. So again, if you have your own opinion, go ahead and put it down below, and I'll see you guys next time.